I was having coffee in Oakland with a friend who's a rabbi when a homeless man approached our table. He asked if we would buy him some food. My friend went inside and bought him a sandwich and coffee, and then a few minutes later, the owner of the cafe approached the homeless man and made him leave. The owner then came to our table to explain that he's had a lot of problems with this man and others in the past, and so he doesn't let them sit at his tables. My friend looked at the owner and said, "I understand you need to do what makes sense for you, but if somebody asks me to buy them a sandwich, I'm going to say yes." My friend is a regular at this coffee shop and has seen this homeless man before. He doesn't always ask for food. They wanted to preserve their relationship with the owner of the cafe they go to regularly and still do what they felt was right. My friend explained that regardless of what this man might have done previously or the owner's experiences, there was a hungry person in front of them, and they had the resources to help. That's the price of being a good neighbor. The sermon that I prepared for this morning is about our obligation to our neighbors. As Rabbi Perlman mentioned at the beginning of our worship, there was an attack on a synagogue in Manchester, England this morning. And in moments like this, I believe that this message is more important than ever. I'll address how this morning's events fit in a little bit later in my sermon. For now, I just want to invite us to take a breath and to approach this message with an open heart. As Jews, we have been called into sacred relationship with our neighbors since creation. At the March on Washington in 1963, Rabbi Joachim Prinz spoke from the main dais immediately before Dr. King told us he had a dream. Rabbi Prinz, a German-born rabbi who fled the Nazi regime, taught that God created Adam as everybody's neighbor. He said neighbor is not a geographic term, it is a moral concept. It means our collective responsibility for the preservation of man's dignity and integrity. From our inception, God obligated us to one another's dignity and integrity. Before we had the opportunity to prove ourselves worthy or let each other down, we became neighbors. To be someone's neighbor is not about proximity, but about responsibility for their well-being. We don't get to choose our neighbors based on location, identity, or perceived worthiness. To be a Jew is to be a neighbor, duty-bound in the dignity and integrity of every other human. And in our world today, our neighbors are being terrorized. People are being snatched off the streets and out of courtrooms and sent to undisclosed locations in America and places and countries that they have never known. Too many people from our backyard to around the world are starving, and we share in that responsibility. Some children run for bomb shelters, and others keep playing because they know that no place will keep them safe. People from Utah to Michigan to Minnesota are gunned down at school and at worship and at home. And some of us within the Jewish community have been willing partners or passive bystanders to the erosion of civil liberties and the rise in fear among non-citizens, nominally in the name of our protection. Our political polarization is not merely about policy differences, but it is rooted in the labeling of some of our neighbors as evil and sinful, the willingness to strip them of rights and even questioning if they deserve to live. When we witness our neighbors in pain, we must resist the urge to respond with "what about my pain?" The harm that we experience does not invalidate theirs. The suffering that our nation has inflicted on others does not make our suffering less worthy of attention. But even amidst attacks on us, our call is not merely to have empathy for innocent people or to acknowledge that there is suffering beyond our own in this world. God holds us accountable for that suffering. We are responsible for their dignity. And if we fail to reach beyond ourselves to alleviate their pain, we commit a sin for which we must repent and repair. On this Yom Kippur, I am repenting for all that I did not do to love my neighbors this year, to protect them and provide for them as much as I was able. And I invite you to join me, not only in considering how we treated our neighbors this past year, but in resolving to meet our obligations to them in the year ahead. I know some of you would rather not hear political sermons. You've shared that worship should focus only on the soul and that our neighborhood should be an oasis from the world around us. But authentic Jewish living is both to be separated from and involved in the wider world, to have moments of genuine rest and distance from the problems that surround us and times of deep engagement with them. From the very beginning of his rabbinate in Germany, Rabbi Prinz addressed the non-Jewish issues of the day, writing that he was never able to conceive of Judaism as something that could exist in splendid isolation. And when he assumed the pulpit at Temple B'nai Abraham in New Jersey in 1939, he argued that membership in a Jewish congregation was a declaration of Jewish and human commitment. This concept included every possible area of human interest and concern. He writes, it was the very opposite of a restricted, ghettoized Judaism that was only involved in parochial Jewish problems and concerns. To be a Jew, we must not only live within the gates of our Jewish neighborhood. To care for our neighbors is not simply a good thing to do or the right thing to do or the cherry on top of an already rich Jewish life. As Rabbi Shai Held, president and dean at the Hadar Institute, declares in his book, Judaism is About Love, acts of loving kindness are not diversions or distractions from what really matters. They are at the very heart and center of the spiritual life. He challenges us, saying that if our study of Torah does not make us kinder and does not draw us closer to people who are in struggle and crisis and loss, we have not studied Torah at all. If we are to take seriously our foundational theology about the creation of humanity, that each person is made B'Tselem Elohim in the image of God, and each person was made as a neighbor to humanity, it must influence our actions. As Rabbi Held teaches, how we treat others is, in some important sense, how we treat God. God's honor and ours are inextricably intertwined. The ethical is theological. Whatever choices we make both inside and outside these gates, but how we treat our neighbor, the other, the stranger, we are either living out or abandoning our theology. How we treat others is how we treat God. To take our religious and theological obligations seriously, they must not live only in our hearts, but in our hands, and not only with those closest to us, but with every image of the divine we encounter wherever we go. This is not a simple task, and it is an obligation that many of us have found increasingly difficult in recent years, myself included. As the machinery of anti-Semitism is built by those on both sides of the political spectrum, we wonder what our neighbors think of us. After October 7th, Jews around the world understandably retreated. Violence against Jews, like the attack this morning, insurrections and assassinations make us want to build walls. The heated rhetoric and vitriolic attacks on Israel and Jews have fractured relationships, raised our fear, and prevented us from speaking to our neighbors. And right here in America, the threats of military invasion and financial retribution by our own government against those remaining committed to diversity and caring for the most marginalized have made some of us lower our voices in submission, have made some of us obey in advance, instead of reaching out a hand to our neighbors. With so much hatred and fear around us, our inclination is to turn inward. Our desire to keep our community safe leads us to hunker down within our gates. Driven by love for our children, we concentrate on only those closest to and most alike us. This particularistic love is natural and important, but it runs the risk of making our child not just the center of our lives, but the moral center of the entire universe. Without critical reflection, we risk redefining our central aim as keeping only this child safe, with minimal regard for others. Limiting our love this way results in a morally restricted and Jewishly insufficient life. If we allow our love, our desire to minimize our own pain, and our reaction to attacks on us to turn us away from loving others, we sacrifice our core moral teachings precisely at a moment when we are already down. We inflict moral wounds on ourselves, amplifying the physical weaknesses inflicted by others. Instead, we must allow our love for our children to overflow on others, recognizing that each person is someone's child, each child the center of a universe, each worthy of our love and protection. To live Jewishly is to recognize that our children are someone else's neighbors and their children are our neighbors, each worthy of love and protection. From our very beginning, Jews have lived in relationship with the wider world. Abraham was a ger toshav, a resident stranger. An Erev Rav, a mixed multitude left with us from Egypt. When we settled in the land of Israel, our texts make it clear that other peoples also lived in that land. Our diaspora communities in ancient days and modern times alike were never completely secluded from their Gentile neighbors. And directly alongside all of these experiences are the commandments to love our neighbor, to love the stranger, to care for the people in our midst, Jewish and Gentile alike, and that all people were made in the image of God. These commandments do not originate from an idyllic period with easy-to-care-for neighbors exactly like us. These commandments were issued at the very same time when familial strife resulted in fratricide, when we lived in mixed communities, and when we were at war with other nations. This view is not Pollyannish or naive. Evil exists. There are people who won't treat us as their neighbors, who will knock us down, threaten us, and hurt us. When we suffer harm at their hands, we question why evil abounds in our world. And perhaps we think their actions absolve us of responsibility. On a morning like this morning, it is all too easy to think of only ourselves, to allow the hatred and evil acts done by others to limit our moral horizon. 10 years ago, Keith Con Harris, a British scholar and writer, wrote about what we should do should there ever be an attack on British Jewry. That piece has been circulating again this morning. He said when, not if, but when this happens, we will make the pain worse if we try to force this attack into agendas those outside the community are already pushing. He calls us to resist the urge to flee from our homes or to blame support for minorities as causing the violence. He tells us to reject the idea that if we had only distanced ourselves from Israel, or if we had only supported xenophobic immigration rules and identity politics, that we somehow could have prevented this attack. Instead, he says we must listen to our collective Jewish voice and our eternal Jewish teachings to guide our response. When I examine our tradition, this is what I believe: that the presence of evil in our world does not invalidate the commandments to love our neighbor and to love the stranger and to pursue acts of justice and righteousness. Rabbi Held writes that the deepest response to the problem of evil is to walk in God's ways, to be a vehicle for God's mercy. Yes, we are obligated to protect ourselves and to distance ourselves as necessary to preserve our well-being, and we are still committed in Exodus to raise up our enemy's donkey, and in Leviticus to not hold vengeance in our hearts. The presence as some people, as evildoers and our enemies, does not abrogate our neighborly responsibility. Our obligation to love our neighbor exists regardless of what other people do, because it is how we act Jewishly in the world. We love our neighbors not because of who they are. We love our neighbors because of who we are. And it is not enough to have empathy for our neighbors and to profess our love for them only in our hearts. Our actions demonstrate our love and fulfill our obligations. Dr. Martin Luther King believed that love without power is sentimental and anemic. Power at its best is love implementing the demands of justice. We are called to love our neighbor not just sentimentally, but to use the power at our disposal, economic and political and ideological, to implement that love, to create the material conditions of justice for all. In the year ahead, we can choose to love our neighbors better with our actions. You can join via Values in Action, our social justice group at Temple Isaiah, as we work on direct service and advocacy projects to help our neighbors. You can help ensure that every person, citizen or not, knows their constitutional rights when they interact with law enforcement or the immigration system by distributing Know Your Rights cards. You can join with friends from inside these gates to go outward together, volunteering in our community. You can use your voice at a city council meeting, a vigil, or a protest, being willing to publicly identify as a neighbor who feels responsibility for the dignity and integrity of the other. While how we choose to act is an individual choice, to love our neighbors is a communal responsibility to which we are all obligated. In 5786, may our actions demonstrate that we each truly love our neighbors. Shana Tova.
could the heart feel? How might the lens get wider if we loved like that, like that? Really loved like that. How might the world be softer? Who could your heart heal? What is the gift